What's going on, everybody? I'm Joshua Stover and this is Stovetop 19. Today I'm going to be showing you the do-it-yourself adjustable weight bench that's going to go along with the DIY power rack I built in the last video. If you guys are new to this channel, I'd love for you to subscribe and go check out my other videos. As you'll find, I do a lot of things on a budget and I prefer to build things with my hands rather than buy them at the store. This build is no exception. Everything in this build was sourced from scrap bins, trash finds or curb finds, or other materials that I had left over from other projects. Let's get this going. After doing some research online of what's already out there, this is the weight bench I wanted to base my design off of due to its size and its features. I knew I wanted an adjustable weight bench, something that I could flat bench press, incline bench press, as well as used for the seated shoulder press. I found some rough measurements online, but will adjust accordingly based on the materials that I have sourced. Someone had thrown this away, what I'm assuming is a seated stair stepper machine. Whatever it is, I knew it would work well for what I had in mind. It has the two hinges that I need for the back of the bench as well as the seat to allow for them to be adjustable, as well as having tubing with rubber caps for the feet or the base of the bench. I'm also sure I'll be able to use the excess tubing for other parts of the build. Well, first things first, let's get this thing torn down so we can start harvesting the parts off of it. I'm going to start with cutting the frame apart to get the feet and hinge pivots separated. If you'd like to see behind the scenes stuff as it happens in real time, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Stovetop19. Then I'll pull apart the old foot pads and cut off the outer part of the hinge. I've reassembled the hinge and am test fitting the hinge mechanism with the tubing I have sourced to make sure it's going to fit. I will need to extend this tubing to get it to the bench to sit at the proper height. I'm taking some other scrap square tubing I have and welding them together to achieve this. Now that the tubing is extended, I'm going to measure and cut it to length. The front of the frame cut to height. I need to now mock it up and get my measurement for the rear of the frame. This length of tubing is going to need to be 44 inches and my scrap tubing I have is 22 inches. So again, I'm going to weld these tubes together to create the overall length required. With the tubing welded together, I am now ready to cut the angle off at the end so I can weld the frame together. Here I am mocking it up, marking the angle, and cutting it off with my angle grinder. Once I'm happy with the fitment, I tack it up and get it welded in. Now I'm going to attach the rear feet to the frame. I decided to split the rear feet in half and weld them to the outside of this piece of tubing for two reasons. The first reason is that by mounting the feet to the outside of the tubing, it will widen the width by 1.75 inches, therefore increasing the stability of the bench. Reason number two is that this upright tubing will serve as the stop for the back pad when the bench is in the flat position. I will cut this upright tubing to length later once I know what size it needs to be. With the rear feet upright welded, it's time to attach them to the rest of the frame. I mock up the frame, mark the angle needed for the rear of the tubing, cut it for good fitment, measure, align it, and weld it all together. So now that the base of the frame is completed, it's time to work on the top half of the bench. The first thing I need to mount is the hinge pivot rod. I cut some notches in the tubing, dropped in the rod, measured, leveled it, tacked it, and welded it into place. Since the hinges are being mounted side by side on this design, I have to bring the seat and back pad tubing back to the center of the frame. I'm going to achieve this by cutting the tubing, turning it 90 degrees, welding it back on, then taking the final piece of tubing, turning it at another 90 degrees, and welding it back on so everything is aligned and centered with the frame of the bench. And again, I have to weld 2 more pieces of tubing together to get the required length for the back pad rail. This final length of tubing is then welded to the hinge. Now that I have an idea of what the height for the back pad stop needs to be, I can go ahead and mark it and cut it. Then I will repeat this process for the seat. With the back and seat mounts made, I need to measure out the length for the support arms that will allow this bench to be adjustable. I'm using some leftover flat bar steel a friend gave me to make these. I decided to give my angle grinder a rest and bust out my plasma cutter for these cuts. After the arms were cut to length, I went ahead and drilled holes at the top and the bottom of the arms. I used a clamp here to clamp the pieces of metal together to ensure that both brackets would have the exact same hole mounting locations. With the arms drilled, I can now use them as a reference to locate where the mounting holes need to be placed in the frame. With all the holes drilled, we're going to go ahead and mount the arms back onto the adjustable portions of the frame. Then I need to create the stops that will allow the different height adjustments for the back and the seat. I'm going to use some leftover tubing from the original piece of equipment that we started with. I'm just going to stick that in my bandsaw and cut off 4 chunks of it. Then I will prep these pieces to be welded. With the stops created, I go ahead and figure out the angles at which I want the bench to be, and then tack and weld these stops into place. Now we need to build the back pad and the seat pad. I'm using some leftover plywood. I'm using my table saw to rip the wood to width, and then using my miter saw to cut the back and seat pieces to length. I rounded the edges of the back with my scroll saw, and then cut the shape of the seat with my skill saw. With the woodworking portion done, I needed to make the seat and back pad mounts. I used what was left of the flat bar steel I had used to create the adjusting arms. I cut this part into 3 pieces. 2 pieces of that will be used to make the back pad mount, and the last piece will be used for the seat mount. I measured and drilled holes in the mounts, then centered them and transferred those holes under the wood. With the mounts bolted to the wood, I took the whole assembly and aligned it to the frame. Once I was confident with the alignment, I welded the brackets into place. I then repeated this process for the seat. With the mounts finished up, I needed to wrap the seat and the back pad. I'm using some leftover vinyl and foam from my mini stunt bike build. I cut the foam to size, used some spray adhesive to stick the foam to the wood, then wrapped and stapled the vinyl. I want to go ahead and throw out real quick that we have limited merchandise right now with Stovetop 19 apparel. We got some beanies and t-shirts if you guys are interested in any of these. By buying them to support the channel, you can go to www.stovercustoms.com/store. And finally, we are near the end. Off camera, I did a little bit of finish grinding and also added a gusset to help triangulate and reinforce the frame. But now we are ready for paint. It's going to be a pretty quick and dirty paint job, being as I only have about 3/4 of a can left over from the cooler cart build. And there we have it, guys. I have my very own do-it-yourself budget home gym. I've got some other ideas I'd like to add on to this, but those will be later videos. I want to thank you guys for watching this channel. If you guys like this video, hit that thumbs up button. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section down below. And as always, hit that subscribe button to help this channel grow. We'll see you guys in the next video.